Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Discriminating Gamer. Say, how do you get a job on Arrakis? Well, first you have to spice up your resume. Ladies and gentlemen, today we're going to go ahead and take a look at Dune, War for Arrakis from CMON.
We'll get back to the review in just a moment. I want to take a minute to ask you to check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about history, books on history, military history. I even post some of my lectures for my classes on there. Please check that out. Please subscribe to that channel. And now, back to the review.
In Dune, War for Arrakis from CMON, 2 to 4 players take on the roles of either the Harkonnens or the Atreides as they battle for supremacy on the desert world of Dune. The game board is a map of various regions of the planet of Dune. Essentially, you have the Harkonnen settlements there throughout. You also have the North Pole. And then you have various places for sieges and environmental testing stations throughout the board. Now, both the Harkonnen and the Atreides player will each get a player board. This will have spaces for action cards and dice allocation and a few other things as well. You're also going to get your house cards. Essentially, the Atreides will get the Atreides cards and the Fremen cards. The Harkonnen will get the Harkonnen cards and the Corrino cards. These are the planning cards, and they're going to drive a lot of the action in the game. Now, each player will get a number of leader cards. Now, some of these leader cards start the game in play. You're going to place them face up on your player board in various sections where they go. They're going to be face up, meaning they're going to be showing the monochrome side of that character. You'll also go ahead and place the character himself on top of that card. Now, the Atreides player is going to put down a number of siege tokens on the board. He's going to put these face down. Now, he can look and see what's on the other side. It's either a 1, 2, or 3. He can look at that at any time. The Harkonnen player may not. You're also going to put out a number of environmental testing stations throughout the board, and they're going to have some advantages on them if the Atreides are able to claim them. Now, next to every one of his sieges, the Atreides player will place a starting unit token. He'll place those face down. Now, he can look at those at any time. The Harkonnen player will not know what's there, so he won't know how powerful the defenses of these sieges are. Now, the Harkonnen player will place his settlement tokens in the protected areas of Dune. He will also place his Corrino and Harkonnen unit tokens on the board face down for a random setup. He'll then reveal them and then place the actual units there on the board. The Harkonnen will also place his Supremacy token on the 0 of the Supremacy track. It goes all the way to 10. The Atreides player has 3 different kinds of scoring tokens. These are prescience tokens, and they will place all 3 of those on 0. Again, that track goes to 10 as well. The Atreides player will then select a secret objective. This tells him where those 3 tokens have to be on that track in order for him to win. Now, game rounds will take place over a series of steps. The very first step is both players will draw 1 planning card from each of their decks. Again, the Harkonnen deck or the Corrino deck, or with the Atreides deck, and the Fremen deck. Next, the Atreides player will lay out 3 prescience cards. These essentially are objectives for the Atreides in order to score on their prescience track. Now, the Harkonnen will also have a spice production track that they will have to keep track of. And what they're going to do next in this next phase is actually they're going to place their vehicles on the board. Now, they're going to have 3 different tokens next to their spice track. They're going to have the Chom, they're going to have the Spacing Guild, and they are going to have the Lance Rod. So they're going to have these 3 different tokens next to their spice production board. And the lowest spice production board on there is going to, first of all, you got to put one of your action die on there, but it's also going to tell you how many ornithopters you get, how many carryalls you get, and how many harvesters you get. The Harkonnen player then, looking at that track, grabs the appropriate number of vehicles and they place those on the board. Now, harvesters typically, if they're in the desert, they're going to gain 1 spice that round. If they are in the deep desert, that is to say, any part of the board that touches the edge, then they can claim 2 spice from that harvester. The ornithopters and the carryall are going to go in various air spots throughout the board. Now, the board itself is divided into various sectors within kind of smaller areas and smaller regions, but these larger sectors usually have 1 or 2 air zones that are adjacent to it. So you place your air vehicles in those zones. Next, you have action resolution. The Harkonnen and the Atreides both roll their action die. Now, the Atreides start the game with only 4 action die. The Harkonnen start with 8 action die. So they roll all their action die, and then they can go ahead and allocate those to the various actions above their leaders on their player board. Now, if either player has a Bene Gesserit token, they can essentially use that Bene Gesserit token just like a dice, but they can place it anywhere. Now, starting with the Atreides, they're going to go back and forth taking actions. So you spend one of your action die, you put it kind of in your used action die spot at the top of the board, and then you can take that specific action. Now, each space has various actions. For instance, you can move 2 units or attack with 1. You can deploy a unit and a leader. There's all sorts of different things. The Harkonnens can take a house action. They can put out more harvesters. There's the Mentat action, meaning you can draw more planning cards. But there's all sorts of things you can do just based on the dice. And of course, those leader cards that are there, the leaders have special abilities that enhance those regular abilities. And you can, once you play a leader ability, you have to like pull it down or flip it over to show that it's spent for that round. Now, that is in play whether or not the figure is actually on the board. Now, another thing you can do is you can spend any one of your die in order to play a planning card. Now, the planning cards have all sorts of goodies and dirty tricks and things you can play. So you can spend a dice to play a planning card and then do whatever is on that card. Now, looking at the board, you can never have more than 6 units in a space. Now, you have different kinds of units. You have regular units that have round bases. You have elite units that have square bases. You have the Sardaukar or the Fedaykin, which are kind of the Harkonnen and Atreides really powerful units, and they usually have kind of a hexagonal base. So those are your units. You can only have 6 of those in a space. However, you can also have leaders there, and you have any number of leaders. They don't count against units. And leaders, when you put them in there, for instance, like the leadership action will allow you to move with leaders and stuff like that. Now, typically when you move, you can only move 1 space. With the Harkonnen, they have ornithopters. Now, if you have units that start in a space that is adjacent to an ornithopter, that unit can move 2 spaces and can move 2 spaces toward an attack. But then you have to remove the ornithopter. Now, the ornithopter, the location they're moving to doesn't have to be in the same sector as the ornithopter, but the beginning location does. Now, the Atreides have some unusual movement abilities. Typically, 2, they move by 1. They will move 1 space. But they also have an action they can take called Desert Power. Now, whenever the Harkonnen has more dice than they do, the Atreides player can take a Desert Power action. Now, Desert Power usually means you can place desert tokens, sandworm tokens, out on the board. You can also, if there are sandworms already on the board, you can move 2 of them, or you can attack with 1 of them. Now, typically, if you put these sandworm tokens on the board, and if there's sandworms actually on the board, Atreides can essentially use them as a bridge to go to any location they want to go to. So it's a way for them to move fast. They're essentially sand riding. They're riding the worms. They're moving around quite quickly. Now, with regard to combat, if you have a legion, that is a collection of units in 1 space, and you want to attack another legion or a siege or what have you, you essentially must be adjacent and you begin your attack. Now, the attack itself is pretty straightforward. Every unit you have just rolls 1 dice. Doesn't matter if they're elite, if they're Sardaukar or Fedaykin, or regular. Doesn't matter. They all just roll 1 dice. But what happens is when you start to compare, because the dice is going to have either spears, which are hits, they're going to have shields, which are, of course, can deflect spears, and they have bursts, and more on that in a minute. But essentially, if you take hits, if they get through the shields and you take hits, How this works is you remove, for every spear, you remove either one regular unit, or you can take an elite unit and for one hit you replace it with a regular unit. Or if you have a Sardaukar and he takes a hit, you would replace it with an elite. So you can kind of make change with these higher value units, and that's their real strength. They can absorb hits. Now, if you roll a burst during combat, all things being equal, if you just have your Legion units there, they don't mean a thing. But if you have a leader in there, if you have a leader that is accompanying them, that leader has a special ability on their card that says what a burst is worth. So if you roll a burst, they may get 2 spears or 2 shields or just 1 spear, or they may get some other funky abilities may trigger. Now, you can only ever roll a maximum of 6 die, but if you have less units on the board, you can actually discard your planning cards in order to gain another die for that round. So you can go ahead, you can roll, and you're going to see, of course, who is left standing when it's over. If the attacker is left standing, they can go ahead and advance into the space that they were attacking. If it was a siege, the Atreides not only get to roll for their units, but they get to roll for the number on the siege. So if it's a 1 or 2 or 3. And of course, all the units and the siege number, there's all revealed once the Harkonnens are coming into attack. But the Atreides will be able to roll for the siege number as well as the regular number of units they have there. Now, when a Harkonnen takes a siege, whatever the number of that siege is, they get to move up that number of spaces on their supremacy track. Now, once all actions are done, you go to the Desert Hazards phase. The Atreides player will place a Sandworm token on any space that contains a Harvester or a Harkonnen Legion. Then they're going to flip all of the Sandworm tokens that are on the board. Now, some of these Sandworm tokens will just say nothing happens, in which case you just take those off. Some of them will have Worm Sign, but they only spawn if they're in the deep desert. They won't spawn if they're in the insular desert. And then you have some that are just Worm Sign across the board. The worms spawn wherever they are. Now, if the worm spawns in the same place as a Harvester and the carryall is covering it, you can remove the carryall and the Harvester will not be harmed. Any Harkonnen units in the same space with a worm, they must retreat. Now, the opposing player, the Atreides, they can choose what space they retreat into. If they can't retreat, then they must resolve a Sandworm attack. The Sandworm will roll a number of die against them. Next, you have the Coriolis Storm. Essentially, any Harkonnen legions that are exposed, that are not in rock or protected by the rock wall, you roll 2 die against them, and they're going to have to take losses depending on that die roll. Next, you go to the Spice Harvesting phase. The Harkonnen player must resolve any bans. Now, if they had actually gone down the previous turn, if they had actually dropped one of the tokens, they get a ban again from the Lancerot, from CMON, from the Spacing Guild, and there are certain limitations on the Baron for that turn. Well, at this point, they go ahead, they resolve all the bans, they're clear. Now the Baron is going to go ahead and collect his spice. As I say, for every Harvester in the Deep Desert, he's going to get 2 spice. For every Harvester in the Insular Desert, he's going to get 1 spice. He can actually carry 1 spice over per round to have an additional spice if he needs it. In order to maintain each of those tokens, again, the Lancerot, the Spacing Guild, CMON, to keep them where they are, it costs 2 spice. If you want to move one up, it will actually cost you 3 spice. If the Baron wants to buy a supremacy track, if he's beneath 5 or below on the supremacy track, he can spend 3 spice to move up 1 space on the supremacy track. Finally, you have the end of round phase. If at that point the Atreides have successfully got enough of their prescience points to win, that is the point at which they will win the game. Any Ornithopters or Carryalls on the board are removed at that time. The Atreides or the Harkonnen may essentially replace any of their named leaders with kind of their basic generic leaders at that point if they want to. And finally, you refresh all of your leader cards for the next round. Now, if during that end phase, the Atreides have discovered that they have met their prescience requirements, then they win the game. Otherwise, if the Harkonnen at any point reaches 10 supremacy points, then he wins. Dune, War for Arrakis. All right, ladies and gentlemen, where to begin? Where to begin with Dune, War for Arrakis? Well, let me just tell you. I remember when this first came out on the Kickstarter, on CMON, when they released the Kickstarter, and I was really tempted. I was really tempted, but I didn't do it. And frankly, I felt a little bit of the burn from the shipping fiasco with Marvel Zombies, and I didn't know if I wanted to jump all in on this one. So I didn't. I thought, no, I'll wait. If it's a good game, I'll pick it up in retail. I don't need all the goodies and stuff. So I'm like, all right. Well, this game came out not too long ago, and I just started seeing stuff, and it looked really cool. And through Asmodee, I was able to request a review copy. So this review copy came, and I'll tell you right now, the box is beautiful. The art is beautiful. What's great is the box is always upright, regardless of which side you put it down. It's a mirror image, the top and the bottom, and it's really cool. Component quality, of course, with CMON is top notch, right? You've got great minis here. You've got great cards and artwork, the tokens, and the board itself. I mean, it's just a stellar production. Just it looks beautiful. And in fact, I was a little nervous because my rule generally is if a game looks amazing, a lot of the time gameplay is not. I kind of feel like the you can either have a really good looking game or a really fun game, and it's not often that you can have the two come together. I remember when I got Company of Heroes, and Company of Heroes looked amazing, and I was thinking, well, it's not going to play very good, and then it played really good. So I'm like, oh, that's so cool. So it can happen. So we go ahead and first game we played, Ray and I, we set this game up, and uh, I got to tell you, there's a little bit of a learning curve. It's not huge, it's not overcome, but there's a lot you got to know here, and a lot of little things. And that first game we played, we kind of screwed up on a few of the rules. I was the Atreides, and I was kind of screwing myself in some ways because I wasn't aware of certain things I could do. And I'd read the rule book all the way through, but it just didn't sink in. And so I blame no one but myself. But that was a dealio. That was a thing. And then, subsequently we played it, and we had a much better grasp of how the game was played. But in both games, it was really interesting, and what the game presents to you, the puzzle it presents to you, is really, really, really interesting and engaging. And first of all, it's a dudes on the map game. That's my bread and butter, right? That's maybe my favorite kind of game is dudes on a map. I love dudes on a map games, and so I'm really getting into this, right? This idea of kind of operational warfare. I mean, this is really set in Dune Part 2, the movie that came out. This is it. This is the war of Muad'dib against the Harkonnens there. And it's really evocative of that. And the theme is really, really well done here and really comes through here. But it's interesting too, just as a game in and of itself, because it is asymmetrical. The Harkonnen and the Atreides are playing two very different kinds of games. The Harkonnen, it's all about the spice production. It's all about going after the sieges. That's what they're doing. With the Atreides, it's all about finding these prescience cards and finding opportunities to score them. And I didn't mention, you've got those ecological testing stations. If you go there and reveal them, if an Atreides goes on there, you reveal them, and you can move up on one of the prescience tracks. It tells you which prescience track you can move up on. So there's a lot here in the fact that they're playing different games. The two sides are playing different games. It's fun. In fact, the game this reminds me most of, and I know War of the Ring is the big comparison. It's by the people that made War of the Ring. The dice action system is similar. But for me, the game, the feeling I get from this reminds me most of Star Wars Rebellion, which is, of course, like a top 5 game of all time. in that idea of asymmetric warfare, of hidden information, of kind of one side being like militarily very powerful, the other side not so much, and yet there's still ways you can compensate for that. The way the Atreides chase the prescience cards is kind of similar to the way the rebels chase their cards in the game. So it's very similar. I get a very similar feel from these games. They're not the same games. They're very different games, but just kind of the feeling I get in those respects are very similar. Now, having said all that stuff about not games being looking good and not being good or vice versa, I think my expectations going into this game was, it's CMON. I love a lot of their stuff. Marvel Zombies looks great. It's great. So I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I expected this game to be good, maybe even great. What I did not expect was for this game to be one of the most fun gaming experiences I've had ever. I am in love with this game. After just a few plays, I'm in love with it. In fact, easily going to be my game of the year. I can't imagine any game topping this from being my game of the year. More than that, I would say this game's easily going to be in my top 10 games of all time. this game maybe I got to play this one more. Maybe I might even like it better than Star Wars Rebellion. It is so good. I mean, I can't remember the last time I have been on a high. And we played this game, we played these few games. In fact, we played it one night, we played it the next night, and I'm still just like, I want to play this game some more. I can't wait. And I'll tell you right now, I have never in my life regretted not backing something on Kickstarter as much as I regret this. Because I look at some of those cool tokens and other bells and whistles that came with that. I'm like, I may have to hunt those down on eBay and pay exorbitant prices because I freaking love this game. This is, like I say, going to go down as one of my favorite games of all time, I think. It's rare that I play a game and within a few plays, I know it's going to be in my top 10 of all time. And so this is cause to celebrate. I freaking love this game. Everything about it, I love. I love the minis. I love the aesthetic of the game, but I love the gameplay. I love that it's asymmetric. I love the choices that you have at allocating the die. And I love the story here. This is one of those games that is so effective. Just like Star Wars Rebellion, it's so effective in bringing you the story of this conflict in such a cool way. It's a cliche to say that CMON knocked it out of the park, but what else can I say? They did it. They did it. I was not expecting to like this game as much as I did, to love this game as much as I did. But like I say, the most fun game I have played in I don't know how long. I can't remember the last game I played that blew me away like this. I'm thinking maybe War Room. It's been a while, but I love it. Anyway, I am rambling, but I just want to convey how much this game is awesome. It's not a cheap game. It is not an inexpensive game, but from my point of view, it's worth it. I'll tell you right now, if I played this game, if I had not received the review copy, I would buy it. So my recommendation for Dune, War for Arrakis, 100% buy it. Thank you once again for joining us today on The Discriminating Gamer. As always, we ask you to please leave a comment for us on YouTube, on Board Game Geek, on our Facebook page, or on thediscriminatinggamer.com. We'd ask you to please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on Twitter. I'd also ask you, ladies and gentlemen, to please check out my other channel, that is Cody Carlson, PhD, where we talk about military history, books on history, fun things like that. I even post some of my lectures on that channel. Please check that out. Please subscribe. It would mean a lot to me. Also, too, please leave a thumb to this video on Board Game Geek. And if you really do enjoy the content we bring you, please, I would humbly ask you to click on the Super Thanks button and leave a tip. How do you annoy a Dune fan? Call the planet Tatooine.
Please somebody help me on my feet again. And I don't know where I'm going, and I don't know where I've been. Please somebody help me on the solid ground. It's a long time, and I'll be dying. Once a year I wind up in the band. God knows that I love
Never one drop of rain on Arrakis.